A moving story of redemption, love, passions, and new beginnings. He was paid to use her for one night. But she carried a buried past and a deadly plan. In the end, he was the one who begged to be forgiven. Watch this story until the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this. Continuing. The capital pulsed through his veins like pure cocaine. Dimitri Vallon adjusted the cuffs of his Italian silk shirt as he watched the city through the bulletproof glass of his penthouse. 42 years old, with grey hair at the temples that only accentuated his natural elegance, dark eyes that never revealed his thoughts, he had built an empire on silence, and every secret he kept was worth more than gold. The intercom rang. Twice, short and discreet as agreed. "Mr. Vallon?" The concierge's voice rang metallic through the receiver. "Your order has arrived." Order. The word amused him. As if it were possible to order absolution, freedom, or the oblivion of crimes that stained the hands of powerful men. But in a way, that was exactly what he had been doing for 2 decades. He sold legal miracles to those who could pay the price. Send. Tie it up. Dimitri walked over to the mahogany bar, poured himself a 30-year-old Scotch whiskey, and sipped slowly, savoring the burn as it ran down his throat. The apartment was an extension of his personality, minimalist, imposing, each piece carefully chosen to impress and intimidate. Paintings by renowned Brazilian artists covered the white walls. Designer furniture filled the spaces with geometric precision. Everything was clean, everything was orderly, everything was under control. The elevator opened directly into his private hall. Dimitri expected to see Roberto, his trusted intermediary, that small, nervous man who resolved the most delicate matters of his personal life. Instead, a woman emerged from the cabin like an apparition. She wore a black dress that hugged every curve of her body with the precision of a second skin. The fabric shimmered softly in the indirect light of the hall, suggesting pure silk. Dark. Hair fell in waves over her bare shoulders, and when she looked up, Dimitri felt something strange move in his chest. Grey eyes, like a storm about to break, stared at him with an intensity that disconcerted him. "Mr. Vallon." His voice was deep, almost husky, filled with a sensuality that seemed natural, unrehearsed. "I'm Isadora." He studied her silently. She was of medium height, with golden skin that suggested mixed ancestry, full lips painted a dark red. Beautiful, no doubt. But there was something else, a kind of dangerous stillness, like a feline watching its prey before it pounces. "I didn't expect you to come in person." Dimitri closed the elevator door and walked toward the living room, knowing she would follow him. Roberto said she'd be discreet. "I'm discreet." She stood near the picture window, looking out at the city lights. "But I'm not invisible." The comment intrigued him. Women in her position often strive to be just that, invisible. Her service rendered, a meeting that never happened, a name that would never be spoken. Isadora, however, occupied the space as if she belonged there. "Would you like something to drink?" Dimitri approached the bar again, more to buy time than out of courtesy. "Red wine, if there's anything national." The choice surprised him. He expected her to order champagne or perhaps politely decline. Instead, he poured a glass of Cabernet Sauvignon from Serra Gaúcha, a label that cost more than the monthly salary of many Brazilians. As he reached out to hand her the glass, her fingers brushed his. The touch was brief, almost accidental, but it left a warm mark on his skin. She sipped slowly, her eyes never leaving his. "Roberto told me you have specific needs." The words came out harsher than Dimitri intended. Isadora smiled for the first time, and the smile was like a blade, wrapped in silk. "We all have specific needs, Mr. Vallon. The question is, what are yours?" The question caught him off guard. In recent years, their encounters had become mechanical, cold transactions, where he dictated the terms and got what he paid for. He had never been asked about his real desires, only his superficial fantasies. You're not what I expected. He took a sip of his whiskey, trying to regain control of the situation. And what did you expect? Submission. Ah. She placed the glass on the coffee table and approached him with slow, cat-like steps. What if I told you that true submission is not about giving yourself up, but about making someone else give themselves up? The words echoed in the silence of the apartment like a challenge. Dmitri felt his muscles tense. He was used to dominating any situation, any person. That was how his world worked. He commanded. Others obeyed. But Isadora watched him, as if she could see through his carefully constructed facade. You're interesting? He finished the whiskey in one gulp. You don't know me yet. She reached out and touched his tie, undoing the knot with precise movements. Dmitri remained still, watching her expression. There was no rush in her gestures, no anxiety, just a quiet certainty as if she knew exactly what she was doing and why. The tie fell to the floor with a barely audible whisper. Why do you do this? He took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. Because you need it. What do I need? To feel. The word hit him like a punch to the gut. Dmitri realized he had stopped breathing. Feeling was a luxury he could not afford. Feeling meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness. In his world, weak men did not survive. But when Isadora rose on tiptoe and touched his lips to hers, he felt it. He tasted the wine in her mouth, the subtle scent of her skin, the softness of her hair between his fingers. He felt something collapse. Inside him, like a dam giving way to the pressure of the water. The kiss was long, deep, and filled with an urgency that neither of them could explain. When they separated, Dmitri felt as if he were seeing the world with new eyes. Where? His voice came out hoarse, unrecognizable. Wherever you want. He led her to his bedroom, an even more minimalist space than the rest of the apartment. Her king-size bed with white Egyptian cotton sheets, bare walls, just a Barcelona armchair in the corner and a low chest of fine wood. The window took up the entire side wall, offering a panoramic view of Sao Paulo that was worth millions. Isadora stopped in the center of the room and waited. There was no hesitation in her posture, no submission, only anticipation. Dmitri came up behind her and placed his hands on her shoulders. Her skin was warm, soft, and he felt a shiver run through his body as he began to unzip her dress. The fabric slid down her hips like water, forming a black puddle at her feet. She was wearing only black lace panties. Nothing else. Jesus! The word escaped his lips like a profane prayer. Isadora turned slowly, unhurriedly, letting him admire her. Small, firm breasts, defined waist, rounded hips. But it was her eyes that hypnotized him again. There was something ancient in them, as if she carried memories that didn't belong to her alone. Touch me. It wasn't a request. It was a soft but irrevocable order. Dmitri obeyed. His hands explored every inch of her skin, memorizing textures, temperatures, reactions. When he reached her breasts, Isadora arched her back and moaned softly, a sound that went straight to his groin. They moved to the bed in a silent dance. Dmitri undressed hurriedly, discarding expensive clothes on the floor like rags. As he lay down beside her, he felt exposed in a way that went far beyond physical nudity. "What do you want from me?" he murmured against her neck, inhaling her scent. All. The answer was simple, but loaded with implications he couldn't decipher. Dmitri wasn't used to giving everything. He was used to taking, to possessing, to controlling. But with Isadora, he felt the urge to give himself in a way. That frightened him. They made love as if it were the last night on earth. It wasn't mechanical or performative sex. It was something primal, necessary, almost sacred in its intensity. Dmitri lost himself in the curves of her body, in the sounds she made, in the way her eyes never closed completely, as if she wanted to engrave him in her memory. When she reached her climax, she screamed his name with a hopelessness that echoed through the walls of the room. Dmitri followed her seconds later, burying his face in her hair and murmuring disjointed words that not even he understood. Afterwards, they lay in silence, their bodies entwined, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Dimitri felt different, as if something fundamental had changed in his internal chemistry. He stroked her hair, thinking of things he had not thought of in a long time: companionship, intimacy, perhaps even love. "Are you staying?" He asked the question without thinking, and immediately regretted it. It sounded needy, vulnerable. For a while, Isadora snuggled against his chest, and Dimitri felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. They talked in whispers about trivial things, favorite movies, trips, books. She was intelligent, cultured, and had strong opinions about art and politics, far from the stereotype he had expected. "Where did you study?" he asked, genuinely curious. "That way. Life has taught me more than any university." The answer was evasive, but Dimitri did not insist. Everyone had the right to their secrets. They had sex again around 3 in the morning, this time more slowly, exploring every reaction, every moan, every gasp. Dimitri was surprised by his own patience, by his willingness to prolong each moment. Usually he finished quickly and dismissed the company. With Isadora, he wanted the night to last forever. When they finally fell asleep, Dimitri dreamed of storms and oceans, of a dark-haired woman walking across the water toward him. He woke just before dawn with a strange feeling in his chest, as if he had lost something important. The bed was empty. Dimitri sat up abruptly, looking around. Her clothes were gone. There was no trace of her presence except for the subtle scent that still clung to the sheets. "Isadora," he called, knowing instinctively that she wouldn't answer. He stood up naked and paced the apartment. Empty. She had left like a shadow, not even leaving a fingerprint on the surfaces she had touched. It was when he returned to the room that he saw the paper on the dresser. A handwritten note, in elegant script, blue ink on cream paper. "You don't remember me, but I never forgot what you did." Dimitri read the sentence 3 times before its meaning began to form in his mind. The paper trembled in his hands. What the hell did that mean? He searched his memory, trying to find some memory of Isadora, some context for those words. Nothing. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere, a fantasy made flesh that now dissolved into a veiled threat. "What the fuck?" he muttered to the empty room. He returned to the bed and sat on the edge, still holding the note. The morning was breaking. Outside, painting São Paulo in golden hues, but he could not feel any beauty at the moment, only a growing sense of unease. Dimitri Vallon had spent 2 decades building walls around his personal life, watertight compartments where nothing leaked from one to the other. His clients didn't know about his pleasures. His lovers didn't know about his crimes. His family knew nothing. But Isadora seemed to know him in a way that defied all these carefully constructed barriers. "You don't remember me, but I never forgot what you did." The phrase echoed in his mind like a sinister mantra. What had he done? How many people had he hurt throughout his career? How many families had been torn apart by his legal maneuvers? How many injustices had he perpetuated in the name of success and money? Dimitri had always justified himself by saying that he was just doing his job. Every criminal lawyer defended the guilty from time to time. He was part of the system. But now, with Isadora's scent still lingering on his skin, those justifications seemed hollow, pathetic. He got up and went to the bathroom, turned on the shower, and stood under the hot water for long minutes, trying to wash away not only the night sweat, but also the feeling that his life had changed irrevocably. When he got out, he put on a robe and went to his home office. He turned on his computer and started searching. Isadora was a common name, but he had resources. Private investigators, contacts in the civil police, hackers who did dirty work for generous fees. He would find that woman. He would find out what she wanted, what her connection to his past was. And then he would take the necessary steps to protect everything he had built. But even as he made the first contacts organizing the hunt, Dimitri knew something fundamental had changed. For the first time in decades, he had found someone who made him feel alive. And now that same person posed the greatest threat to his carefully orchestrated existence. The phone rang. It was Roberto. "Mr. Vallon?" I hope you enjoyed the order. Who is she, Roberto? Sir? The woman, Isadora. Who is she? There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sir, I don't know any Isadora. What we planned for yesterday was cancelled at the last minute. The girl had an unexpected event. Dimitri felt his blood run cold. Roberto, a woman was here last night, dark-haired, light-eyed, said her name was Isadora. Mr. Vallon, I swear on my mother's life that I didn't send anyone to your apartment yesterday. The meeting was cancelled, remember. I even called to let you know, but it went to voicemail. C'est putain. Call ended in silence. Dimitri stood in the middle of his office, phone still in hand, trying to process the information. Isadora had not been sent by Roberto. She had arrived on her own. She knew his address, his habits, and had access to the building. And she knew secrets from his past that he didn't even remember having. Who the hell are you? He whispered into the void. Outside, São Paulo was waking up to another day. Millions of people were going about their daily lives, chasing their dreams, fighting their own battles. But for Dimitri Vallon, the hunt had begun, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure who was the predator and who was the prey. The next 3 days were a hell of obsessive investigation. Dimitri cancelled meetings, postponed hearings, ignored calls from important clients. His secretary, Marcia, an efficient 50-year-old woman who had worked with him for a decade, began asking discreet questions about his well-being. Mr. Vallon, Mr. Gutierrez called again. It's about the construction company case. He said it's urgent. Dimitri didn't even look up from his computer screen. He was in his office in downtown São Paulo, an entire floor of a commercial building on Avenida Paulista, surrounded by shelves of law books and graduation pictures that attested to his academic achievements. But at that moment, none of that mattered. Only one thing consumed his thoughts. Reschedule, I'm busy. Sir, he said that the federal police... I said I'm busy, Marcia. The clipped tone silenced the secretary. She left with a worried sigh. Closing the door behind her, Dimitri continued browsing through the databases his contacts had provided: birth records, social security numbers, school transcripts, employment records. He searched for any woman named Isadora who might have some connection to his life. Nothing. It was as if she didn't exist. His private investigator, a former police officer named Marcelo, called later that afternoon with the same frustrating result. Dimitri, I've gone through every database available. There is no record of an Isadora who fits the description you gave me. Female, approximately 30, dark hair, light eyes, average height. It's too generic. Keep searching, broaden your search, use similar names. Isadora, any variation. I already did. Listen, are you sure that's her real name? The question struck Dimitri like an obvious revelation that he had ignored, out of sheer desperation. Of course, Isadora wasn't her real name. A woman who appeared out of nowhere, who knew his darkest secrets, wouldn't use her real identity. Dimitri? Are you still there? Yes, listen, Marcelo, I need you to access the security cameras in my building. Tuesday night around 9 o'clock. I want to see how she got in. This could take a few days. Building managers are annoying about these things. Pay whatever it takes, I need to see her face. Okay, what about the name? Should I still look for Isadora? Dimitri thought of the note, the words he had memorized. You don't remember me, but I never forgot what you did. No. Change your focus. Look for women who have some connection to me. Old cases, family members of people I've prosecuted or defended. Victims, witnesses, anything. This is going to be a lot of work. You have enough enemies to fill a phone book. Then start with the most obvious ones. The call ended, and Dimitri leaned back in his leather chair, massaging his temples. He was right. Over the course of his 20-year career, he had made countless enemies. Families of victims who had been denied justice, prosecutors he had publicly humiliated, police officers who had seen dangerous criminals get away with his legal maneuvers. But none of them had approached him the way Isadora had. None of them had touched him, slept in his bed, made his heart race with a simple look. The intercom rang, interrupting his thoughts. Sir, I have a call for you. I said it's personal. Dimitri frowned. Few people had his office number for personal matters. Who is it? A woman. She did not want to be identified. His heart raced. Put him through. There was a click, then a voice he recognized immediately. Hello, Dimitri. Isadora. The name came out as a whisper. I heard you've been asking questions about me. Dimitri sat up straight in his chair, all his senses on high alert. How did you get this number? The same way I got your address, the same way I got into your life. She paused. You underestimate me. What do you want? Talk. In person. Where? There. Is an exhibition at the Instituto Moreira Salles, Brazilian Contemporary Art. Have you seen it? Dimitri knew. It was in Poços de Caldas, a refined place frequented by the cultural elite of São Paulo. Public, sophisticated, safe. Why there? Because there are things you need to see. The call ended before he could respond. Dimitri stared at the receiver, his heart hammering in his chest. Every fiber of his rational being screamed at him to ignore the invitation. Isadora was dangerous, a direct threat to his carefully constructed life. The sensible thing to do would be to cut off all contact and increase personal security. But he knew he would. The need to see her again, to decipher the mystery she represented, was stronger than any instinct for self-preservation. She had stirred something fundamental in his psyche, had awakened feelings he thought had died long ago. Dimitri cancelled his evening appointments and drove to Poços de Caldas. The Instituto Moreira Salles was housed in a restored historic mansion, surrounded by lush gardens that contrasted with the modern architecture of the galleries inside. It was a Thursday night, and the crowd was as expected. Intellectuals, artists, businessmen with cultural aspirations, elegant women discussing aesthetics. In small groups, he found her in the second gallery, standing in front of a series of paintings that took up an entire wall. She was wearing an emerald green dress that highlighted her golden skin, her hair tied back in a low bun that left her neck bare. A few men were watching her discreetly, but she seemed completely absorbed in the works in front of her. Dimitri approached slowly, studying the paintings first before looking at her. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. They were portraits of women. Dozens of them, faces contorted in pain, eyes empty, mouths open in silent screams. But it was not only suffering that was reflected on the canvases. There was also anger, determination, a primal strength that emanated from the painted figures. Impressive, isn't it? Isadora said without turning around. Disturbing. The artist's name is Helena Cardoso. She started painting after her mother was murdered. Dimitri felt something cold run down his spine. Helena Cardoso. Do you know the name? He studied her face in profile, searching for any trace of irony or sarcasm. He found nothing but a disturbing serenity. Should I know? Isadora finally turned to face him. She was even more beautiful than he remembered, but there was something different in her eyes, a hardness he hadn't noticed before. Helena Cardoso. Lost her mother when she was 17. Maria Cardoso was beaten to death by her partner, a man named Augusto Ferreira, an influential politician with family money, connections in all spheres of power. Dimitri felt his stomach tighten. The name Augusto Ferreira unearthed memories he had buried deep inside. The case reached court, but something interesting happened. The evidence against Augusto began to disappear. Witnesses changed their versions. Evidence was questioned due to irregularities in the collection process. The defense attorney was very competent. He knew how to exploit every technical flaw. Isadora. The lawyer's name was Dimitri Vallon. The words fell between them like stones in a silent lake. Dimitri remembered the case now. It had been early in his career, when he had yet to prove himself to powerful clients. Augusto Ferreira had paid him a fortune to secure his acquittal, and he had done his job with the brutal efficiency that would become his trademark. "You," he began, but the words died in his throat. "I'm Helena Cardoso, the daughter of the, woman you helped kill." The world seemed to tilt around Dimitri. The voices in the gallery faded to a distant murmur. The colors of the paintings faded to abstract blurs. Only Eleanor's face remained in focus, beautiful and terrible in its deathly calm. You lied about your name. You lied about who you were. All these years, pretending to be a respectable man, an ethical professional, but I know who you really are. Dmitri took a step back, instinctively looking for an escape route. But Elena made no aggressive move. She just continued to stare at him with those stormy eyes. What do you want from me? I already said that you feel. Feel what? The pain it caused, the injustice it perpetuated, the void it left in the life of a 17-year-old girl, who saw her mother reduced to a judicial statistic. Elena moved closer to him, and Dmitri could smell her scent, the same one that had permeated his sheets 3 days ago. His proximity made her remember other sensations, his hands on her skin, his moans in her ear, the way he had given himself completely to her that night. Did you use my body to get revenge? I used your body to get to your soul. And did it work? The question came out more vulnerable than he intended. Elena smiled, but there was no joy in her expression. You tell me. What did you feel when you woke up and found me missing? Dmitri didn't answer, but they both knew the answer. He had felt loss, abandonment, an inexplicable sadness that had haunted him for days. Why didn't you kill me? He asked. If you wanted revenge, this was the perfect opportunity. Because death would be too easy, too quick. Elena touched his arm lightly, a gesture that might have seemed intimate to any casual observer. I want you to live with the weight of what you've done. I want you to see the monster you've become. I did my job. Every lawyer doesn't plant false evidence. Every lawyer doesn't buy witnesses. Every lawyer doesn't destroy families to enrich murderers. The accusations hit him like slaps in the face. They were true, all of them. In Augusto Ferreira's case, he had crossed every ethical line he had sworn to uphold when he graduated. But it had been necessary. The client paid well, and Dmitri needed to establish his reputation. How do you know that? I've spent 20 years of my life investigating you. I know every dirty case you've touched, every life you've destroyed, every injustice you've facilitated. Elena stepped away from him and looked at the paintings again. These are portraits of the victims of the men you freed, raped women, abused children, broken families, all dead or missing after their attackers were acquitted. Dmitri followed his gaze and saw the paintings with new eyes. They were not just artistic expressions of suffering. They were real faces, true stories, lives interrupted by his professional skill. You're crazy. Maybe. 20 years of hatred can make anyone crazy. Elena turned to him again, but no crazier than a man who sells his soul for money. I never... Yes, he did, and the worst part is that he didn't even realize when it happened. It happened little by little, case after case, lie after lie, until there was nothing left of the man you were. Dmitri wanted to deny it, wanted to scream that she was wrong, that he was just a professional doing his job, but the words wouldn't come, because deep down, in a part of himself that he had buried long ago, he knew she was right. What happened to you afterward? He asked, changing the subject. After the trial? I went to live with my aunt in the countryside. I studied, I graduated, in law too, ironically. To face me? To understand how the system worked, how men like you could sleep peacefully after protecting monsters. They sat in silence for a few minutes, staring at the paintings. Dmitri tried to process everything he had discovered. The woman who had made him feel alive for the first time in years was the daughter of a victim of her own unbridled ambition. Why do you sleep with me? The question came out abruptly. Elena didn't look surprised. Because I need to understand you, how you think, how you feel, what drives you. And you found out? I discovered that you are not a complete monster. There is still humanity in you, buried beneath layers of cynicism and greed. I saw that when you touched me. The memory of their night together came flooding back. The intensity, the unexpected tenderness, the way he had given himself completely. Dmitri realized that he had been more vulnerable with Elena than he had been with anyone else in his entire adult life. Does that change anything? It changes everything, and it changes nothing. What the hell does that mean? It means I now know you are capable of redemption, but I also know you will have to pay for what you did. A middle-aged couple approached, interrupting the conversation. They began to comment on the paintings with the artificial enthusiasm typical of art openings. Elena and Dmitri walked away, heading towards the garden. The night air was cool, scented by the flowers surrounding the institute. They stopped near a water fountain, the soft sound masking their words from prying ears. "What do you want from me?" Dmitri repeated the question. "Confession." "Never." "Then we will continue our game." "What game?" Elena smiled, and for the first time since she had revealed herself, her expression seemed genuine. "The game of seduction, of revelation, of making you fall in love with me while you discover who I really am." "You're crazy if you think I'm going to fall in love with someone who wants to destroy me. Have you ever fallen in love?" The words hit him like a punch to the gut because they were true. In the 3 days since she'd disappeared, Dmitri had thought of nothing else. Not just the sex, though that was extraordinary, but the whole woman. Her intelligence, her strength, the way she challenged him intellectually. "You don't know me. I know you better than anyone alive. I know you drink 30-year-old scotch when you're nervous. I know you have a scar on your right shoulder from surgery you had when you were 15. I know your mother died of cancer when you were 22, and that you've never forgiven yourself for not being there for her last moments." Dmitri pulled away abruptly. "How the hell do you know that?" "Because I studied you. Every aspect of your life, every trauma, every motivation. I needed to understand the man who destroyed my family." "And what did you discover?" "That you started out as an idealist. You wanted to use the law to bring justice, but ambition corrupted your principles, and now you don't even remember who you were before." Eleanor approached him again, but this time there was no threat in her movements, only a deep sadness that touched him in an inexplicable way. "I still feel your mother, Dmitri, in the way you touch a woman, as if she's going to break, in the way you avoid talking about feelings. You've never gotten over her loss." "Stop." That's why he became so hard, so cold, so he would never feel that pain again. I said stop. But Elena didn't stop. She touched his face gently, the same intimate gesture she had made on the first night. "Your mother would be ashamed of the man you have become." The sentence was like a blade piercing through her chest. Dmitri grabbed her wrist tightly, his eyes shining with anger. "You have no right." "I have every right. You killed my mother with your greed. Now I'm going to make you remember yours." They stood like that for long seconds, hands clasped together in a mixture of violence and intimacy. Dmitri could feel her pulse racing. Beneath his fingers, could see the defiant glint in her eyes. "Why are you doing this to me?" "Because you have to choose." "Choose what?" "Whether you want to continue being the man you have become, or whether you want to try to recover who you were." Elena broke free of his grip and began to walk away. "There's a bar on Augusta Street called Bourbon Street. Friday at 10 o'clock if you want to continue our conversation." "What if I don't go?" She stopped and looked over her shoulder. "Then we'll know that the man your mother raised is definitely dead." Dmitri stood alone in the garden, surrounded by the scent of flowers and the soft sound of the fountain. In the distance, he could hear voices from the exhibition, people discussing art and beauty, as he faced the ugliest truth of his existence. Elena Cardoso had come into his life like a storm, challenging everything he believed about himself. And worst of all, he wanted to see her again, even though he knew that every meeting was like playing with fire. Friday night on Bourbon Street. He knew he was going, just as he knew he was heading for his own destruction. But for the first time in 20 years, Dmitri Vallon could no longer run from himself. Dmitri arrived at Bourbon Street at 9:45 in the evening, 15 minutes before the agreed time. The bar was located in the heart of Augusta. that pulsating artery of São Paulo's nightlife that never sleeps. Neon lights from various establishments created an urban kaleidoscope on the sidewalks, wet from the light rain that had fallen during the afternoon. Bourbon Street was one of those places that tried to recreate the atmosphere of New Orleans in the middle of São Paulo. Exposed brick, yellowish lighting, jazz playing softly on the speakers, waitresses dressed as if they were in the French Quarter. Dimitri ordered a double whiskey and sat at a table in the back where he could see the entrance. His hands were shaking slightly as he lifted the glass to his lips. For the past 2 days, ever since their meeting at the gallery, he had been in a constant state of agitation. He slept poorly, ate little, and had cancelled more professional commitments. Marcia, his secretary, had discreetly suggested that perhaps he needed a vacation. If she knew the real reason for his condition, she would recommend a psychiatrist. Dimitri obsessively relived every word of his conversation with Elena, the way she had dissected his personality, as if she had access to secret archives of his soul. The revelation that she had dedicated 20 years of her life to studying him, to understanding his deepest motivations. And most of all, the way she had touched him, making him feel simultaneously exposed and desired. Elena Cardoso. Now that he knew her real name, he had researched her. She graduated in law from USP, specialized in human rights, and worked for a few years as a public prosecutor in cities in the interior. Then, mysteriously, she abandoned her legal career to dedicate herself to art. Her exhibitions were rare, always with social themes, focusing on violence against women and impunity in the judicial system. It was as if she had built her entire adult life around the injustice he had helped perpetuate. The clock was 5:10 when she appeared. Dimitri saw her before she spotted him, and for a moment he could observe her without being noticed. Elena wore a black turtleneck and jeans that accentuated her curves. Her hair fell loosely over her shoulders. She wore subtle makeup, and she had a natural elegance that made all the other women in the bar seem artificial. She scanned the room with her gaze until she found him. She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, and walked towards him with that feline grace he had already memorized. "I thought you weren't coming." Elena sat down across from him, placing a small leather bag on the table. "I thought the same. But here we are." "Here we are." Dimitri signaled to the waitress, who approached with a professional smile. Elena ordered a caipirinha. He ordered a double whiskey. They sat in silence until their drinks arrived, studying each other like two chess players sizing up the pieces on the board. "You researched me," Elena said. "A statement, not a question." "How did you know?" "Because I would do the same thing." She took a sip of her caipirinha, making a face. "Too sweet. I always forget that bars in São Paulo don't know how to make caipirinhas properly." "Where did you grow up?" "Inland Bahia, a small town where everyone knows everyone. My aunt had a bar in the main square." Elena smiled, this time with genuine nostalgia. "I helped make caipirinhas for the tourists who came on the weekends. I learned that the cachaça has to be good and the sugar has to be just right." The image of Elena as a teenager, working in a country bar, contrasted sharply with the sophisticated woman he had known. Dimitri tried to imagine her. At 17, an orphan, lost, trying to rebuild her life after the tragedy. "How did you get to me?" "With patience, lots of money, and some contacts I'd rather not mention." "Contacts?" "People who were also harmed by the men you freed. There is a whole network of victims who know each other, who share information." The revelation chilled him. Dimitri had never thought his actions would have such organized, long-lasting consequences. "How many people? Do you really want to—" "No?" He nodded, though a part of him preferred to remain ignorant. 63 families direct, people who lost loved ones because criminals you defended returned to the streets and committed new crimes. The number hit him like a punch in the gut. 63 families, hundreds of people whose lives had been shattered by his professional expertise. "You can't hold me responsible for—" "Why?" "Because you were just doing your job." Elena leaned across the table, bringing her face close to his. "You planted evidence, Dimitri. You brought witnesses. You threatened victims." That's not work, that's complicity. How do you know that? Elena opened her purse and took out a small digital recorder. She placed it on the table between them. Augusto Ferreira did not die in prison, as everyone thinks. He died in freedom, on a farm in the interior of Goiás, surrounded by luxury and impunity. But before he died, he confessed everything. Dimitri stared at the device. Everything? How you helped him escape justice. The methods you used, the bribes, the threats, everything recorded with details that only the two of you knew. That proves nothing. A dying man can say anything. Yes, but he also handed over documents, proof of bank transfers, contracts, signed with the names of false witnesses. Elena touched the recorder with her fingertip. And there's more, from other cases, other clients who decided to confess before they died. Dimitri felt his world spin around him. If Elena really had all that, it could destroy him completely. Not just his career, but his freedom. He could spend the rest of his life in prison. Why didn't you hand everything over to the federal police? Because that would be too easy. You would be arrested, tried, convicted, but you wouldn't understand why you were being punished. You would continue to see yourself as a victim of the system, and you want me to understand. I want you to feel the weight of every life you helped destroy. Elena put the recorder away in her bag and leaned back in her chair. The expression on her face was a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. There's something else you need to know. What? Augusto Ferreira was not the last. After he was released, he killed 3 other women. All with the same pattern, brutal beating, attempt to make it look like a domestic accident. Dimitri closed his eyes. 3 women dead because he had done his job too well. 3 families torn apart because his ambition had spoken louder than his conscience. Did you know these women? One of them was my best friend from high school. She married Augusto 2 years after he killed my mother. It lasted 6 months. Elena's voice dropped low, heavy with pain. She called me a week before she died. She said she was scared that he beat her. I asked her to leave, offered her help. She said she couldn't, that he had threatened to kill her entire family if she tried to escape. Elena, do you want to know how she died? Beaten with a hammer. Augusto told the police that she had fallen down the stairs. The forensics were poorly done, as usual. Case closed. Dimitri opened his eyes and saw tears streaming down her face. They weren't tears of self-pity, but of pure, concentrated rage. That's why you made those paintings. Every face I painted represents a real victim. Women who died because men like you think money can buy impunity. They sat in silence for a few minutes. The jazz continued to play softly. The people around them chatted and laughed, oblivious to the drama unfolding at that table in the back of the bar. Dimitri tried to process everything he had heard, but his mind seemed unable to absorb the magnitude of his guilt. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked. "I already told you. You confess. And then? Then you pay for what?" "You did. Prison, among other things." Dimitri downed the rest of his whiskey in one go, feeling the alcohol burn his throat. "What if I say no? So I make public everything I have, recordings, documents, testimonies. Your life becomes hell, but you continue to see yourself as a victim. You are blackmailing me. I'm offering a chance at redemption. What's the difference?" Elena leaned in again, but this time her movement was gentle, almost intimate. "The difference is that if you confess voluntarily, I believe there is still salvation for your soul." "And does that matter to you?" "It matters. More than it should." Her answer surprised him. There was something in her voice, a vulnerability that didn't match the image she had built as a ruthless avenger. "Why?" "Because the night we spent together, you were different, gentle, vulnerable. I saw the man you could have been if you hadn't chosen the easy path." Dimitri remembered that night with painful clarity, the way he had given himself completely, as if Elena had been able to heal him of wounds he hadn't even known existed. Was it all calculated? Every gesture, every word. It started like that, but it didn't end like that. What does this mean? Elena hesitated for the first time since they had met. She drank more of her caipirinha, making another face of disgust. It means I didn't expect to feel what I felt. And what did you feel? Connection, true intimacy. For the first time in 20 years, I forgot for a few hours that you were my enemy. The confession created an atmosphere of erotic tension between them. Dmitri remembered her body beneath his, the way she had moaned his name, how she had clung to him as if she were going to drown. And now? Now I'm confused, torn between the woman who planned her revenge for 2 decades and the woman who discovered that it's possible to feel something for you. Dmitri reached across the table and touched her hand. Elena didn't pull away, but he felt her muscles tense. Elena, don't say you're sorry, not yet. You don't even fully understand what you should be apologizing for. Then help me understand. Elena turned her hand and intertwined her fingers with his. The gesture was surprisingly intimate, filled with a tenderness that contrasted with the harshness of her words. Do you really want to understand? Or do you just want to say what you think I want to hear? I want to understand. Then come. With me. Elena stood up, paid the bill, and walked toward the exit. Dmitri followed her, feeling like a man walking toward his own judgment. Outside, Augusta was bustling with nightlife. Groups of young people walked by laughing, couples held hands, beggars begging on street corners. Elena began to walk, and Dmitri followed her in silence. Where are we going? To a place where you can see the consequences of your choices. They walked for 15 minutes until they reached a more run-down area of the city center. Old buildings, some windows, lit, others completely dark. Elena stopped in front of an apartment building that had seen better days. My mother lived here when she was killed. Elena looked up at the third-floor windows. Apartment 307. 2 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen barely big enough for 1 person. Dmitri followed her gaze. He tried to imagine Elena as a child running through the narrow hallways, a simple family trying to build a decent life. She worked as a maid. 3 houses a week she earned little, but she always managed to support me with dignity. Elena touched the glass door of the building. Augusto Ferreira met her at a São João party. Charm, money, promises. My mother thought she had found a prince charming. And you, what did you think of him? I was 17. I thought any man who treated my mother well was a hero. Elena laughed bitterly. At first, he really did seem different. He brought Sass flowers, bought us dinners at expensive restaurants, promised to buy us a better house. They started walking again, now towards a small, dimly lit park. When did the violence start? 3 months after he moved into our apartment. The first time was a slap because she had burned dinner. He apologized later, cried, said he was stressed with work. My mother forgave him. Dmitri knew the pattern. He had seen it in dozens of similar cases. The cycle of domestic violence, always escalating, always finding excuses. Second time was a punch in the stomach because she had questioned where he had been late. Third time was a shove that made her hit her head against the wall. Elena stopped and looked at him. Do you want me to continue? It is not necessary. I have to, because you need to understand that every punch she took after her acquittal could have been avoided. They sat on a park bench. A fountain in the center dripped irregularly, and the sound echoed in the silent night. The last time I saw my mother alive, her face was so swollen she could barely open her eyes. She begged me not to go to the police, saying that Augusto had promised to get treatment, that things would get better. Why wasn't it like that? Because I was young and stupid. I believed her. I thought her love for him would be stronger than violence. Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that surprised him with its intimacy. 2 days later, he killed her. Dmitri felt the weight of the words like stones on his chest. He wrapped his arm around Elena, and she didn't resist. How did you know it was murder? From the autopsy. Injuries incompatible with an accidental fall. Finger marks on the neck, defensive bruises on the arms. She had fought to survive. Elena began to cry silently, hot tears that soaked Dmitri's shirt. He hugged her tighter, feeling a mixture of guilt and protectiveness that he didn't know how to process. It was then that I decided to study law. I wanted to understand how Augusto managed to escape justice. I wanted to prepare myself to one day confront him. But he died before that. Yes, cancer, ironically a sweeter death than he deserved. Elena pulled away from him and wiped her eyes. But you were still alive, and you had been the architect of his impunity. Dmitri tried to find words that could express what he felt, but there was nothing that was adequate. Apologies seemed inadequate. Justifications sounded pathetic. Elena, Shh. She placed a finger over his lips. Don't say anything. Yet, just feel. They sat in silence for long minutes. Dmitri watched her face in the dim light of the street lamps, seeing not only the woman who had seduced him, but the orphan girl who had dedicated her entire life to the search for justice. Can I ask you something? He said finally. He can. Why did you approach me like that? Why didn't you just confront me from the start? Elena smiled sadly. Because I wanted you to feel what my mother felt. I don't understand. She fell in love with Augusto before. She found out who he really was. When the truth came out, love kept her from escaping. Elena touched his face gently. I wanted you to go through the same experience. To fall in love with me before you found out who I was. And it worked. You tell me. Dmitri looked into her eyes and saw his own soul reflected there. Despite everything, the manipulation, the lies, the threat she posed, he couldn't deny that he had fallen in love. Not just with the mysterious woman who had seduced him, but with the complex person she had revealed herself to be. Yes, it worked. So now you understand my mother's dilemma. What it's like to love someone who can destroy you. Elena stood up and began walking back to the main street. Dmitri followed her, lost in thought. When they reached Augusta, she stopped and turned to him. I have something to show you. At my house. What? The complete dossier. Everything I've gathered on you in 20 years. Why? Because I want you to see the magnitude of what you've done, and because I want you to make an informed choice. Between what? Between continuing to be who you are or trying to become who you could have been. Elena called a taxi. During the ride to her apartment in Pinheiros, they remained silent, both lost in thought. Dmitri watched the city lights passing by the window, reflecting on how his life had completely changed in just a few days. Elena's apartment was surprisingly cozy. The furniture was simple but tasteful, the plants were everywhere, and the walls were covered in paintings, some of hers, some by local artists. There was no trace of the obsessive revenge she had cultivated for 2 decades. Coffee? She asked, heading into the kitchen. Please. While Elena prepared coffee, Dmitri examined the paintings on the walls. They all depicted women, but not all of them were expressions of pain. Some showed strength, resilience, overcoming. You paint very well. Thank you. Art saved me from madness. Elena returned with 2 cups of coffee and led him into a small office. The walls were covered with files, photographs, newspaper clippings. It was like a detailed map of Dmitri's professional life. My God, he muttered, taking in the magnitude of the investigation. 20 years of work, every case, every client, every questionable legal maneuver. Elena pointed to a specific section. There are the collateral victims, people who died or disappeared after the criminals you defended returned to the streets. Dmitri walked over and saw dozens of photographs, smiling faces that had been cut short by violence, life stories reduced to judicial statistics. How did you get all this? Private investigators, hackers, ex-cops, disgruntled with the system. When you have a just cause and enough resources, information will come. Elena opened a thick file and placed it on the desk. This is you, Dmitri Vallon, your entire career documented. From the first case to the last. Dmitri flipped through the file with shaking hands. It was his professional life dissected with surgical precision, every ethical commitment he had violated, every line he had crossed, every life he had helped destroy. But why are you showing me this? Because tomorrow I'm going to hand all this over to the public. Prosecutor's office, unless you confess voluntarily. What if I confess? You will still be judged. You will still pay for your crimes, but maybe, just maybe, your soul can find some peace. Dmitri closed the file and looked at Elena. She was standing by the window watching the city below. And us, what happens to us? I don't know, that depends on who you choose to be from now on. Dmitri approached her from behind and placed his hands on her shoulders. Elena tensed but didn't pull away. I love you. The words were out before he could filter them. I know. And you? Do you feel anything for me? Elena slowly turned around. There were tears in her eyes again. I feel more than I should. More than is safe. More than is fair to my mother's memory. Dmitri kissed her then desperately, as if he could absorb her pain and transform it into something different. Elena responded with equal intensity, her hands clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a world that was falling apart. When they broke apart, they were both panting. That doesn't change anything, Elena whispered. It changes everything. You still need to confess. And if I confess, can I still have you? Elena touched his face with infinite tenderness. First, you need to find out who you really are. Then we'll see if that person is worthy of being loved. It was almost 3 in the morning when Dmitri left Elena's apartment. She had given him 24 hours to make his decision. Voluntary. Confession or public exposure. Redemption or destruction. As he drove home, Dmitri knew he had reached a defining moment in his life. For the first time in decades, he had the chance to choose between what was right and what was expedient. Between saving his career and saving his soul. And for the first time, I wasn't sure what choice I would make. Dmitri couldn't sleep. He lay in his king-sized bed, staring at the ceiling. Elena's words echoing in his mind like a torturous mantra. 24 hours. Voluntary confession or public exposure. Redemption or destruction. At 5 in the morning, he gave up trying to sleep. He got up, put on a robe, and went to the kitchen to make coffee. His hands shook as he operated the Italian espresso machine that had cost more than many Brazilians' monthly salaries. Everything in his apartment spoke of success, of a life built on choices that now seemed rotten at the roots. The coffee was bitter, but he drank it anyway. He needed caffeine to think clearly. 20 years of career, a reputation built brick by brick, contacts worth millions. All of that would disappear if Elena made good on her threat. But for the first time in decades, Dmitri questioned whether that life was really worth preserving. The phone rang at 7 in the morning. Dmitri hesitated before answering, fearing it was Elena with some new ultimatum. But the voice he heard was that of Marcia, his secretary. Mr. Vallon, sorry to call so early, but an urgent situation has arrived. What situation? A new client, very influential, wants to meet with you today. Dmitri massaged his temples. It was the last thing he needed right now. Reschedule for next week. Sir, he said it's about the Ferreira case. The name struck Dmitri like a thunderbolt. Augusto Ferreira had been dead for 5 years. What the hell did anyone want to talk about him? Who is the client? He identified himself only as Mr. Montenegro. He said you would understand the urgency. Montenegro. The name was also familiar, but Dmitri couldn't place it in his memory. What's the address? He asked to meet at the Copacabana Palace in Rio. He said he would send a private jet to pick him up. Private jet. Copacabana Palace. Whoever this Montenegro was, he had enough money and influence to make Dmitri consider the offer, especially at a time when his career was hanging by a thread. Accept. But I want all the details about this man before I board. I'm already taking care of it. The jet will be waiting at 2 in the afternoon in the executive aviation hangar. Dmitri hung up the phone and looked out the panoramic window. São Paulo was waking up to another day, oblivious to the drama unfolding in his life. Maybe it was an opportunity to escape for a few hours, to gain time to think of a strategy, or maybe it was just a way to postpone the inevitable. He spent the morning trying to focus on work, but his thoughts kept returning to Elena. The way she had touched him, the way she had cried in his arms, the way she had confessed that she felt more for him than she should have. There was something genuine in those tears, a vulnerability that contrasted with the calculated coldness of her revenge. At 11 in the morning, Marcia called with information about Montenegro. I got some basic information. Ricardo Montenegro, 62 years old real estate businessman. Estimated fortune of 2 billion reais. He has never been prosecuted, but there are rumors of links to money laundering. And the connection with Augusto Ferreira? They were partners in some ventures in the 90s. After Ferreira was arrested, Montenegro took over all the businesses. Dimitri began to understand. Ferreira had been just the tip of the iceberg. There were other men, other crimes, other victims, and if Montenegro was looking for him, it meant trouble was on the horizon. There's one more thing, sir. I found a reference to a case filed in 1998. 3 girls disappeared from a construction company owned by Montenegro and Ferreira. Dimitri's stomach clenched. 3 girls, underage, the kind of crime that stained the soul of anyone who touched it. Details? Little information. The case was closed due to lack of evidence, but Marcia hesitated. But what? The lawyer who represented Montenegro at the time was you. Dimitri hung up the phone and stood in the middle of his office, trying to access memories he had buried deep inside. It was 1998. He was just starting out in his career, desperate for big clients. He remembered Montenegro vaguely, a short, balding man with small, cruel eyes. There was something about him that bothered Dimitri, but money had been more important. 3 missing girls. Dimitri tried to remember the details, but it was like trying to catch smoke with his hands. He had suppressed the memory for good reasons. 2 in the afternoon, he was in the executive aviation hangar, boarding a Learjet that would take him to Rio in less than an hour. During the flight, he tried to prepare for the meeting, but he couldn't stop thinking about Elena. Her ultimatum would expire in a few hours, and he was flying away instead of making a decision. The Copacabana Palace was an icon of Brazilian hotels frequented by celebrities and millionaires from all over the world. Montenegro had booked a presidential suite on the top floor with a panoramic view of Brazil's most famous beach. Dimitri was greeted by 2 security guards who led him to his suite. Montenegro was on the balcony, watching the beach scene through binoculars. When he turned to greet Dimitri, the latter immediately remembered him. Dimitri Valin, the lawyer who saved my life. Montenegro looked older, more fragile, but his eyes still held the same cruelty that Dimitri remembered. Mr. Montenegro, it's been a while. 25 years, but who's counting, right? Montenegro gestured for Dimitri to sit in a leather armchair. Champagne? I prefer whiskey. Of course, a man of refined taste. Montenegro served the drinks and settled into an armchair opposite. I imagine you're curious about the reason for my call. I confess that I do. Augusto Ferreira, our dear friend. Apparently he talked too much before he died. Dimitri felt his blood run cold. Talked about what? About our old business dealings, about certain irregularities that happened in the 90s, about how you helped us resolve delicate problems. Mr. Montenegro, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't be modest, Dimitri. You saved my company, my freedom, my life. Montenegro took a sip of champagne. But now we have a problem. What problem? Montenegro walked over to a coffee table and picked up a folder. He handed it to Dimitri, who opened it with trembling hands. Inside were photographs. Photographs of Elena entering and leaving buildings, talking to people, visiting places. There were also transcripts of phone conversations, investigative reports, documents that detailed her every move over the past few weeks. Are you investigating Elena Cardoso? Not just investigating, protecting our interests. Montenegro sat back down. She poses a threat not only to you, but to me as well. Like this? Augusto's confessions before he died. They weren't limited to his wife's case. He talked about other things, business we did together, things that could put me in prison for the rest of my life. Dimitri continued to leaf through the folder. There were photographs of Elena in her apartment, others at the institute where the exhibition was being held, some at the bar where they had met the night before. Are you guys following her? 2 weeks ago. since we found out she had recordings of Augusto. How did you find out? Montenegro smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. I have contacts in many places. When someone starts investigating important people, I know about it. Dimitri closed the folder, feeling nauseous. What do you want? May you convince your little girlfriend to forget about this obsession with justice. May she destroy all the evidence she has collected. What if she doesn't accept? Then we will have to take more drastic measures. The threat hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Dimitri looked at Montenegro and saw a man who would do anything to protect his secrets. Are you threatening to kill her? I am offering a civilized solution to a problem that benefits us all. She won't accept it. She spent 20 years of her life planning this. Then you'll have to be more persuasive. Montenegro stood up and walked to the window. There is another option, of course. You can choose to side with her, but in that case, you will both have to face the consequences. What consequences? A tragic accident. A robbery gone wrong, a drug overdose. São Paulo is a dangerous city, Dimitri. Bad things happen every day. Dimitri felt anger rise inside him. For the first time in his life, someone was directly threatening a person he loved, and the feeling was unbearable. You won't touch her. That's up to you. Montenegro returned to his chair and opened a bottle of wine. I have a proposition for you. Convince Elena to destroy the evidence, and I will pay you $10 million. Half for you, half for her. Enough money to start a new life anywhere in the world. What if we refuse? So tomorrow you two will appear in the newspapers as victims of a brutal crime. Unfortunately, the police will never find the killers. Dimitri drank the rest of his whiskey in one go, trying to buy himself time to think. Montenegro had unlimited resources, powerful connections, the ability to make anything disappear. If he wanted to kill Elena, he could probably do it. Why don't you solve this yourself? Why do you need me? Because she trusts you. She's in love with you. Only you can convince her to give up her revenge. What if I can't? Then you also become a problem that needs to be solved. Montenegro stood up and held out his hand. You have until noon tomorrow to give me an answer. After that, I can no longer guarantee anyone's safety. The flight back to São Paulo was torture. Dimitri stared out the windows, watching the city lights come closer, knowing that every minute that passed brought him closer to an impossible decision. Elena or Montenegro, love or survival, redemption or self-destruction. When the jet landed at Congonhas, it was already 9 o'clock at night. Dimitri drove straight to Elena's apartment, knowing that her ultimatum would expire in a few hours. He found her in the studio, painting a new picture. It was a portrait of a young, beautiful woman with sad eyes and a melancholy smile. When Elena saw him, she put down her brush and turned to face him. I thought you wouldn't come. I had to take care of some urgent matters. Related to me? The question surprised him. Elena always seemed to know more than she should. Why do you ask that? Because there have been 2 strange men watching my building for 3 days. Cars change places on the street, but the people are always the same. Dimitri felt panic rising. Montenegro wasn't bluffing. He really did have men watching Elena. I need to tell you something important. Elena gestured to the couch, and they sat down side by side. Dimitri told her about Montenegro, about the threat, about the $10 million offer. He saw Elena's face change as she realized the magnitude of the danger. Would he really kill for that? Without hesitation. He's killed before. The 3 girls who disappeared in 1998. Do you know about this? I know more than you think. Their names were Julia, Mariana, and Beatriz. They were between 14 and 16 years old. They worked on a construction site in Montenegro as cleaning assistants. Elena stood up and walked over to a bookshelf, picking up a folder similar to the one Montenegro had shown. I got testimonies from some people who worked with them. They all confirmed that Montenegro and Ferreira abused the girls regularly. How did they disappear? One of them threatened to report the abuse. The next day, all 3 disappeared. They were never found again. Dimitri closed his eyes, trying to process the information. Montenegro wasn't just a criminal. He was a predator who destroyed innocent lives to satisfy his sick desires, and you helped me cover it all up. I didn't know. Yes, he knew. Maybe not the details, but he knew something was wrong. Even so, he chose money. Elena reached out and took his face in her hands. Dmitri, you have a chance to do the right thing now. For the first time, in your life, you can choose what is fair over what is expedient. He's going to kill us. Maybe. But at least we'll die with our souls clean. Dmitri kissed her then, desperately, as if it were the last time. Elena responded with equal intensity, her hands clinging to him as if she could absorb his strength. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I love you too. Despite everything, I love you. They made love on the sofa in the studio, surrounded by Elena's paintings, by the evidence of the crimes they had uncovered, by the scent of paint and turpentine that filled the air. It was different from the other times, more urgent, more desperate, filled with the knowledge that it might be the last time. Afterwards, they lay on the floor, covered only by a blanket Elena had taken from the couch. She drew lazy circles on his chest with her fingertip. What's your plan? Dmitri asked. I have no plan. Tomorrow I will hand everything over to the public prosecutor's office, as I promised. Even knowing that Montenegro can kill us. Especially for this, I can't let him keep destroying lives. Dmitri pulled her closer, feeling her heart pounding against his chest. What if we ran away? Take his money and disappear? Where to? Europe. Asia? Anywhere far from here. Elena pulled away and faced him. Would you be able to live with a clear conscience, knowing that Montenegro would still be free to abuse other girls? Dmitri didn't answer, but they both knew the answer. No, he wouldn't be able to. Not after meeting Elena, seeing the world through her eyes, finally understanding the weight of his choices. Then we have no choice. We always have a choice. The question is whether we are willing to pay the price. They sat in silence for long minutes, absorbing the magnitude of what they were facing. Dmitri thought about his life before he met Elena, empty, mechanical, built on lies and moral compromises. Now, for the first time, he felt like he was living a life worth living, even if it was just for a little while. Elena, there's something I need to tell you. What? About your mother's case. There was evidence I hid, witnesses I silenced. It wasn't just professional competence. I actually helped a murderer escape justice. Elena didn't look surprised. I know. How do you know? Because I spent 20 years investigating every detail of the case. I know exactly what you did, how you did it, and why you did it. And yet you are here with me. I'm here because I believe in redemption. I believe that people can change, can choose to be better than they were. Dmitri felt tears burn his eyes. I don't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about deserving. It's about choosing. You can choose to be the man you were, or you can choose to be the man you can become. They slept entwined on the floor of the studio, surrounded by the remnants of a life dedicated to art and justice. Dmitri dreamed of his mother, of conversations they never had, of choices he could have made differently. He woke up at 6 in the morning to the sound of his cell phone ringing insistently. It was Montenegro. Dmitri, I hope you spent the night thinking about my proposal. I haven't decided yet. Very well, but I have some information that may help you decide. What information? Your girlfriend is not alone in this crusade. There are other people involved, other families who want justice. If she doesn't back down, they too will have to be discouraged. Dmitri's blood ran cold. How many people? 15 families, 63 people, including children. All of them can have very convenient accidents. You are a monster. I'm a businessman protecting his investments. You have until noon, Dmitri. After that, there will be no more negotiation. The call ended. Dmitri looked at Elena, who had woken up and heard part of the conversation. 63 people, she whispered. Families of other victims. He'll kill them all if you don't back off. Elena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, São Paulo was waking up to another day, oblivious to the drama unfolding in that small apartment. I can't carry the weight of 63 deaths on my conscience. So we're going to take his money? Elena turned to him, and Dimitri saw a fierce determination in her eyes. No, let's end this once and for all. Let's destroy Montenegro before it destroys us. Dimitri felt a mixture of fear and admiration. Elena wasn't just seeking justice for her mother. She was willing to risk everything to protect people she didn't even know. This is suicide. Maybe, but it's the only way to stop a man like him. Elena picked up her bag and began to put documents inside. I'll deliver everything this morning. But first I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago. What? I will tell the story of the 3 missing girls. I will give them names and faces. I will make Montenegro pay not only for the crimes he committed, but also for those he tried to hide. Dimitri watched her prepare for the final battle, and he knew he had made his choice. No matter what happened, he would stand by her side. For the first time in his life, he would choose what was right over what was safe. Elena. Yes, I'll go with you. She smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. Am I sure? Absolutely. No matter what happens, we face it together. Elena leaned in and kissed him softly. Then let's change the world, Dimitri. Valen. One truth at a time. The São Paulo Public Prosecutor's Office was housed in an imposing building in the city center, a symbol of the justice Elena had sought for 2 decades. At 9 in the morning, she and Dimitri walked down the marble corridors, carrying 3 briefcases filled with evidence that could bring down not just Montenegro, but an entire network of corruption. That stretched back decades. Elena had arranged to meet with prosecutor Leticia Moura, an expert in human rights crimes, and one of the few people in the justice system she trusted completely. Leticia was a woman of 45, with grey hair tied in a severe bun and intelligent eyes that did not forgive powerful criminals. Elena, we haven't spoken in 2 years. Leticia stood to greet her, but her expression hardened when she saw Dimitri. And this is the famous Dimitri Valen. Dr. Moura. Dimitri extended his hand, which was ignored. Have a seat. Leticia gestured to the chairs in front of her desk. Elena called me yesterday saying she had important information about cold cases. She didn't mention she was accompanied by one of the most corrupt lawyers in the city. Leticia, please, Elena began. No, it's fine, Dimitri interrupted. She's right. My reputation speaks for itself. Then why are you here? Because I want to confess. The word hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Leticia leaned back in her chair, studying Dimitri with the eyes of a predator who had just found unexpected prey. Confess what exactly? Everything. 20 years of crimes, planted evidence, bought witnesses, suppressed evidence. I have a list of cases, names, amounts, methods. Leticia picked up a tape recorder and placed it on the table. Are you sure you want to do this, without a lawyer present? I am sure. Elena took Dimitri's hand under the table, offering silent support, as he began the most difficult confession of his life. For 2 hours, Dimitri detailed every crime he had committed, every ethical line he had crossed, every life he had helped destroy. Leticia asked specific questions, requested clarifications, and took detailed notes. When Dimitri finished, the call. Silence in the room was deafening. That's enough to sentence him to more than 30 years in prison, Leticia finally said. I know. And you understand that from this moment on, you are in preventive custody. I understand. Elena felt tears burn her eyes. She knew this moment would come, but she wasn't prepared for the reality of seeing Dimitri being arrested. However, Leticia continued, there are extenuating circumstances, spontaneous confession, cooperation with justice, and apparently a large volume of evidence against other criminals. What other criminals? Dimitri asked. Elena opened the first briefcase and began to take out documents. Ricardo Montenegro, Augusto Ferreira, and a network of at least 40 businessmen and politicians involved in crimes ranging from murder to human trafficking. Leticia examined the documents with growing interest. Audio recordings, photographs, bank statements, signed contracts, witness statements. It was a dossier more complete than anything the prosecutor's office had gathered in years of investigation. How did they get all this? 20 years of meticulous research, Elena replied, and a few last-minute regrets. Leticia continued, reading, her expression growing darker with each page. My God, Elena, this is explosive. If it's all true, it's true. Every document has been verified. Every recording has been authenticated. So we are talking about the biggest operation against corruption and organized crime in the history of São Paulo. Dimitri felt a mixture of relief and terror. Relief that he was finally telling the truth, terror for what would happen next. Doctor, Moura, there is something else you need to know, Elena said. Montenegro is aware of our investigation. He has threatened to kill not only me and Dimitri, but the families of other victims as well. How many people? 63, including children. Leticia picked up the phone immediately. I'm going. To call the federal police. We need protection for all these people. While Leticia made the necessary calls, Elena and Dimitri were alone for a few minutes. He pulled her close and kissed her softly. Thank you, he whispered against her lips. Why? For saving me from myself. We saved ourselves together. The door opened and Leticia returned, accompanied by 2 federal police agents. We have a problem. Montenegro has disappeared. He left the hotel in Rio this morning and no one knows where he is. Dimitri felt his blood run cold. He's coming this way. How do you know? Because that's what I would do. He's going to try to eliminate the evidence and the witnesses before it all becomes public. One of the agents approached. Mr. Vallon, Ms. Cardoso, we'll put you in preventive protection immediately. No. Elena stood up. If we hide, he'll go after the other families. We're his main target. As long as we're visible, he'll focus on us. This is very dangerous. It's the only way to protect innocent people. Leticia watched Elena with a mixture of admiration and concern. Do you have a plan? I do, but it will require Dimitri to do one more difficult thing. Dimitri stared at her. Anything. You need to call Montenegro, tell him you accept his proposal, arrange a meeting. For what? So we can catch him red-handed, with recordings, witnesses, irrefutable evidence. One of the agents shook his head. Too risky. Montenegro won't approach unarmed. Then we'll have to outsmart him. Leticia studied Elena and Dimitri's faces, seeing the determination of 2 people who had chosen the most difficult but morally correct path. Okay, let's do it. But with full protection. Undercover agents, wiretaps, cameras, everything. Dimitri picked up the phone with shaking hands. Montenegro answered on the first ring. Dimitri, I've been waiting for your call. I accept your proposal. Clever, I knew he would come to the right conclusion. But I have conditions. Which? I want half the money before the meeting, and I want guarantees that the other families will not be touched. Fair enough. Where do you want to meet? Dimitri looked at Elena, who showed him a paper with an address written on it. There's an abandoned warehouse in the East Zone, Rua Doutor Almeida Prado 1347. Do you know it? I can meet. What time? 6 in the afternoon. Perfect. And Dimitri? Don't try anything stupid. I have men all over town. The call ended. Dimitri looked at Elena, seeing in her a mixture of fear and determination that made him love her even more. Are you sure about this? Absolutely. It's the only way to end this, once and for all. The next few hours were a marathon of preparation. The federal police installed listening devices in the warehouse, positioned snipers in neighboring buildings, and organized rapid response teams. Elena and Dimitri were equipped with tiny microphones and GPS trackers. By 5 o'clock, they were in the warehouse, surrounded by surveillance technology, but feeling completely exposed. The place had been an auto parts factory years ago. Now, it was just a skeleton of concrete and rust. Are you nervous? Elena asked. scared. And you? Me too. But for the first time in 20 years, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. Dmitri pulled her into his arms. Elena, if anything goes wrong, it won't go wrong. But if it does, I want you to know that these were the best days of my life. Meeting you, falling in love with you, discovering who I really am, it was worth every moment. Elena kissed him intensely, savoring the taste of his lips as if it were the last time. I love you too, more than I thought it was possible to love anyone. A dark car pulled up in front of the warehouse at 6 o'clock sharp. Montenegro got out alone, but Dmitri could see other vehicles parked nearby. He hadn't come unarmed. Dmitri. Montenegro entered the warehouse with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. And the beautiful Elena. We finally meet in person. Mr. Montenegro. Elena kept her voice steady, but Dmitri could feel her tension. Did you bring the money? Dmitri asked. Montenegro gestured to one of his men who entered carrying a briefcase. $5 million as agreed. What about the guarantees about the other families? My words, as long as you keep your end of the bargain. Elena walked over to the briefcase and opened it. It was indeed full of money. More money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Now I want to see the evidence destroyed, Montenegro said. Elena took out a second briefcase she had brought. It was full of documents, dummy copies that had been prepared specifically for this moment. She began to tear them apart methodically. All the recordings, too. Montenegro was clearly nervous, constantly looking around. Elena picked up a digital recorder and threw it on the floor, stepping on it. The device shattered into pieces. There, now we're even. Montenegro laughed, but the sound was dry, humorless. Not exactly. Two armed men emerged from the shadows of the shed. Dmitri realized they had been deceived. Montenegro had never intended to honor the deal. Do you really think I'd let you live after all the trouble you've put me through? Montenegro pulled a pistol from his jacket. Nothing personal, but I can't risk you changing your mind. You said you wouldn't kill us if we cooperated, Elena said, trying to buy time. I lied. Like you lied about destroying all the evidence. Dmitri's heart raced. How did Montenegro know? Do you think I'm an idiot? You know it's impossible to destroy 20 years of investigation with a briefcase of documents. Montenegro pointed the gun at Elena. Where's the real evidence? They were handed over to the district attorney's office this morning, Elena said, lifting her chin defiantly. So you have sealed your fates. Montenegro was about to pull the trigger when the warehouse exploded into motion. Federal police agents emerged from every entry point. Snipers illuminated Montenegro with laser sights. Amplified voices shouted commands. Federal. Police, drop your weapon. You are surrounded. Get down. Now. Montenegro looked around, realizing he had walked into a trap. His men dropped their weapons immediately, but he kept his pistol pointed at Elena. If I'm going down, I'm taking you with me, he shouted. Dmitri didn't think. Instinctively, he threw himself in front of Elena at the exact moment Montenegro pulled the trigger. The sound of the shot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Dmitri felt a devastating pain explode in his chest. He fell to the ground, blood dripping down his white shirt that was quickly turning red. Dmitri! Elena knelt beside him, pressing her hands against the wound to try to stop the bleeding. Montenegro did not have time for a second. Shot. The snipers took him down with surgical precision. He died instantly. Call the ambulance now, Elena screamed as she held Dmitri in her arms. Does it hurt? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Not as much as it should be. Dmitri smiled weakly. I think the adrenaline is still working. You're going to be okay. You have to. Be okay. Elena. Her voice was getting weaker. Don't talk. Preserve your strength. I need to tell you something. Tell me later, when we're safe. Not now. Dmitri took her hand. Thank you for teaching me what true love is. Stop talking like you're going to say goodbye. And thank you for teaching me the difference between being alive and actually living. The ambulance arrived in 5 minutes, but but it felt like 5 hours. Elena accompanied Dmitri to the hospital, holding his hand the entire way, whispering words of encouragement as the paramedics worked to stabilize him. The surgery lasted 4 hours. Elena spent the entire time in the hospital hallway being comforted by Letitia and the federal police agents. When the doctor finally left the operating room, she stood up with her heart pounding. "He will make a full recovery." The doctor smiled. The bullet went through his lung but missed any vital organs. It was a complex but successful surgery. Elena collapsed into a chair, all her pent-up emotions finally finding release. She cried with relief, with gratitude, with love. Dmitri woke up 2 days later. The first thing he saw was Elena sleeping in a chair next to his bed, hair disheveled, clothes wrinkled, but still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Elena. Her voice came out as a whisper. She woke up immediately. "Dmitri, thank God you're okay." "What do you mean, fine? I feel like a truck ran over me." Elena laughed through her tears. "You got shot saving my life, you idiot." "Ah, that? It was worth it." "Don't joke about it." Dmitri tried to sit up, grimacing in pain. "What happened to Montenegro?" "Dead, and his entire network has been dismantled. The evidence we gave to the district attorney's office resulted in the arrest of 37 people. What about the other families?" "All safe. The threat is over." Dmitri closed his eyes, feeling a huge weight lift off his shoulders. "Is it really over?" "It's over. You fulfilled your part of the agreement with justice. Letitia said that your collaboration and the risk you took to protect witnesses will be considered significant mitigating factors." "How long?" "Probably 5 years, with the possibility of progression to semi-open regime in 2 years. Dmitri nodded. It was a fair sentence, considering the magnitude of his crimes. "And you? What will you do?" Elena took his hand and brought it to her lips. "I'll wait." 5 years is a long time. I have waited 20 years for justice. I can wait 5 years for love. He is sure. Absolutely. Elena leaned over and kissed him softly. Besides, who said these 5 years were going to be wasted? I'll visit you every weekend, we'll write letters, I'll paint portraits of you, and when you get out, we'll start a new life. Where? Wherever you want. We have enough money to start over wherever we want. What money? Elena smiled. The 5 million Montenegro brought. Technically, the money was the proceeds of crime, but the federal police authorized it to be used as reparations for the victims. Your share will be held until you get out of prison. Dmitri couldn't believe it. After a lifetime of making bad choices, he had finally made the right one, and because of it, he had gained not only the redemption of his soul, but also the love of the most extraordinary woman he had ever known. Elena? Yes? Marry me. Now? When I get out of prison. Or sooner if you want to marry a prisoner. Elena laughed, a pure, joyful sound that echoed through the hospital room. Of course, I will, but only if you promise one thing. Anything. That you will never lie to me again. I promise, no more lies, no more secrets, only truth. Then yes, Dmitri Vallon, I accept to marry you. They kissed again, and Dmitri felt like he had finally found what he had been searching for his entire life without knowing it. Redemption, true love, and the chance to be a better person. Outside the hospital, São Paulo continued its eternal dance. Millions of people fighting their own battles, chasing their own dreams, trying to find meaning in their lives. But in that room, 2 people had found something rare and precious, the chance to turn pain into love, revenge into forgiveness, and the past into the future. Elena spent the next few months preparing for a new life. She sold her paintings, organized her belongings, and visited the families of the victims who had been helped by the police operation. Many wept with gratitude, others offered forgiveness. All expressed admiration for the woman who had dedicated her life to seeking justice. Dmitri was tried and sentenced to 5 years in prison, but his exceptional cooperation with the courts resulted in him being sentenced to semi-open prison. After only 2 years, Elena kept her promise. She visited him every weekend, wrote him daily letters, and kept his hope alive during the most difficult times. They were married in a simple ceremony in the penitentiary chapel, surrounded only by a few close friends and the symbolic presence of all the victims they had helped save. Elena wore a simple white dress, Dimitri a prison suit, but they both smiled as if they were the only 2 people in the world. When Dimitri was released after serving 3.5 years of his sentence, Elena was waiting for him at the prison, gates with a simple car and a suitcase full of new clothes. There were no photographers, no drama. Just a man leaving his past behind, and a woman who had proven that love really can change anything. They moved to a small coastal town in the interior of Bahia, where Elena had grown up. Dimitri found work as a human rights professor at a local university, using his expertise to educate young lawyers about the dangers of corruption and the importance of professional ethics. Elena returned to painting, but now her paintings portrayed hope, rebirth, and the beauty of human redemption. Her exhibitions attracted people from all over the country, not only for their artistic quality, but for the powerful message they carried. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after their first meeting at the hotel, they walked along the beach hand in hand, watching the sunset paint the sky with golden and red hues. "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. "Of what?" "Of having chosen to confess. Of having given up his old life." Dimitri stopped walking and pulled her into his arms. "Elena, my old life wasn't a life at all. It was just an empty existence, built on lies and greed. My real life began the night you walked into that hotel room, even knowing everything that happened afterwards. Especially because of everything that happened afterwards." They kissed as the waves lapped at their bare feet, and Dimitri knew he had finally found redemption. Not in religion, not in philosophy, but in the love of an extraordinary woman who had seen the worst of him and still believed he could be better. Elena had come into his life like a storm, destroying everything he thought he knew about himself. But after the storm, she had left something new and beautiful in its place, the chance to be truly human. And in that moment, walking on the beach with the woman he loved, Dimitri Vallon knew he was finally truly alive.